Absolutely nothing in the cockpit of an aircraft should ever be designed or created without close involvement and input from the pilot.
People who make planes?
Specific Technology 6.
Generations of adaptation to the tasks of a special military operation.
And those who lift them into the sky for the first time, violating the familiar laws of aerodynamics.
It may be, but we've seen it.
There are two planes.
Rotating in stopper.
To each other.
Performing unimaginable aerobatic maneuvers from the most extraordinary perspectives. 100 and how on earth 5 generations of planes teach to fly and think faster than the pilot.
And advice how to act in this situation.
He requires 50% in order to successfully complete the given task.
Attention, they keep traditions and secrets.
Lots of interesting things, but I can't tell you.
But something will still be revealed. For the first time, we will see our 5th generation fighter with a flat nose helmet of the future will tell and show who and how aircraft invents, makes, and then educates on the ground and in the sky, piercing the clouds.
No.
I know. Here is the Hrivnia pilot, test pilot Sergei Bogan at the last air show in China was perhaps the most recognizable. If there was a prize of audience sympathy, it would definitely go to the chief pilot of KB Sukhoi. Bogdan was not given passage, queues were lined up, photos were taken as a souvenir autographs. The pilot is really like a rock star. People admitted that they specially traveled across China to the city of Zhuhai to see Sergei Bogdan and his flight on a Russian fighter of the 5th generation.
Very beautiful, I have to say that these are the coolest maneuvers I have ever seen. I actually came here just for this plane since I'm a big fan of his amazing skills.
This is just aerobatics. Opening their mouths, the guests of the air show watched the flights of our Su-57. Of course, only from the ground, viewers of Channel 1 have the opportunity for the first time to see the latest Russian combat aircraft in the sky from unimaginable angles. To do this, we installed 12 video cameras on fighters. This has never happened before. You will be able to see flight dynamics from all sides. We will show modern air-close combat. At what speeds can it pass? How long does it last? Who will emerge the winner? My eyes couldn't keep up with his astonishingly fast maneuvers at all.
Complex.
Overloads reach 9G, which is incredibly simple yet impressive.
A hero is a real hero.
Perform turns with an overload of 9 nines, somewhere in the order of 20 seconds when flying at an extremely low altitude. The turn makes me very tense. I use all my muscles plus the anti-overload suit works. I drive the turn along the lane. I see everything clearly. I'm aware of everything. I see that the strip it moves does not rotate smoothly, but it moves discreetly. This is how the blood apparently acts. And for a split second, the image completely freezes and I see a multitude of frames.
He quickly clicked in his eyes. It was in 2014 during the China Air Show. Then Sergei Bogdan showed the capabilities of the 4th generation fighter plus Su-35 10 years later, also in China. For the first time in the international arena, he represented our fighter for 5 generations. A month before the air show, each maneuver begins to be honed in the sky of the Moscow region. Test pilot Sergei Bogdan on the Su-57 has more than 1,000 hours of flight time preparing for the next flight one-on-one with him, concentrated notes for the flight task in his pocket. Here somewhere the landing strip of equipment is reported and the readiness of the machines is traditional. Sergei Bondarn, for the first time raised in the sky fighter of the 5th generation in January 2010, gave life and now together with other pilots test at KB Sukhoi, who has been training the fighter for a year. During this time has not changed, only the internal appearance is a completely different machine. Other engines, artificial intelligence. The computer starts working as soon as the pilot sat in the chair, pressing one button, auto. Wild check of all systems by restarting. Here you can carefully observe the precise movement of the steering surfaces.
See, it deflects in completely independent different directions at large angles, and thanks to this it provides exactly those interesting points of the characteristic. The plane can move, let's say, contrary to the classical laws in aerodynamics. You can perform corkscrews and whatever. Completely unthinkable tail-forward flights, and the plane is stable.
This is a completely different philosophy of flight. Indeed, contrary to the classical laws of aerodynamics, the main advantage of supermaneuverability is that the pilot can lose speed to zero, but the aircraft will be controllable, and at low altitudes. The first supermaneuverable with controlled thrust vector was the Su-35 fighter. For comparison, to bring out their corkscrew supermaneuverable aircraft, the test pilot needs only 500 meter, and the machine is in a horizontal distal position. That generation 127 for output, and that it will require about 5 kilometers, that is, the altitude is 10 times greater. Sergei Bogdan recalls his feelings when piloting the Su-27 fighter. It seemed fantastic then for a long time did not fly on it, tested with 57, and after a few years so happened again, took off on Su-27 and was again shocked.
How on earth am I supposed to get on this plane? It's completely oak. And it wasn't just that. The irony was that it felt like flying in a heavy bomber. I think, well, how are you? Well, you're a test pilot. Why don't you sit down? That is the Su-27 aircraft, which it would seem is the pinnacle of perfection aircraft of the 4th generation, and after some time it seems such evolution.
Is this how the evolution of fighters happened? The last 40 years Su-27, the aircraft of the 4th generation 80-90, was considered the best fighter in the world. Su-35 replaced the 4th generation. Plus similar, only outwardly plans 35 is made using heavy-duty composite materials. It is lighter, its service life is increased, the fuel reserve, the new powerful onboard radar equipment. Su-35 sees the enemy 2 times, further engines 35 with 3 meters. Thrust vector, hence its super maneuverability. Unlike the Su-27, it can literally rotate in the sky on one spot. In 2019, the Sky repeated the 5th generation fighter with 57 completely new combat aircraft as the transition to the major league supersonic speed, cruising without afterburners, heavy-duty locator, household computer with artificial intelligence about what it is for and what it does in flight, further detailed the wide glider increases lift. Makes the fighter stable on supersonic lines. Flat fuselage gives stealth for the same, and ammunition is placed inside the glider. Our 5th generation fighter continues to improve from the new flat Saplo unique frames. For the first time, we are showing what has been talked about so much in the world. The Russian engine with a flat nozzle is 7 at the start. Since the flight is a test, there is one round nozzle on the right. There is no doubt about its reliability, and the operation of the flat engine is still being checked in flight by the chief designer of the Su-57. The principle of this aircraft is modular. Some units are quickly changed to others. That is, engines with a flat nozzle in the future can be equipped with aircraft that are already performing combat work.
Not much can be said, of course, but most importantly, she solved functions larger than the axis-symmetric Saplo. It is a metal and composite structure specially developed by United Engines Construction Corporation and applied on the aircraft to create new capabilities, including providing low visibility in the radioactive range, which determines the characteristic shape of such a cottage cheese and allows it to be used in a wide range of altitude and flight speeds of the aircraft. In fact, complements existing aerodynamic controls, allowing to create moments in 3 planes and thereby control moments on pitch. Roll to the track channel, since the angle of installation of the nozzle is preserved with an asymmetric nozzle, then all possibilities for super maneuverability of the aircraft are also preserved.
Of the foreign flat nozzles in the American F-22 Raider, but it does not deflect only in the vertical plane, and therefore ours has the ability to maneuver more. The flat nozzle narrows the high-temperature jet, which reduces the visibility of the aircraft in the infrared range, but perhaps the most important thing in this plane, the brains here are dry. You can say they are pumped. Artificial intelligence collects data from sensors and transmits it to the pilot. All this is done by this onboard computer. The software is fully developed. Our specialists, ranging from the operating system to ultra-complex tasks, including elements of artificial intelligence, microprocessors, as well as domestic Elbrus architectures.
We get wolves from the manufacturing enterprise. They come to us absolutely stupid. That is, these are sterile blocks that have absolutely nothing. It is at our enterprise that the basics and principles of aircraft operation and the already developed software are formed. And here it is the millionth code period. It is loaded on this stand. The system sees it as if it is standing on an airplane and actually flying.
Such tests go on for several months. The fact is that all the information that collects a modern aircraft, one person simply physically unable to process artificial intelligence as two. Helps to pilot, so the pilot can throw the control stick and stall it all. It won't happen. Artificial intelligence will take over everything. In addition, the computer, having analyzed the combat situation, can give advice. Which goal is the priority? How to take the aircraft to the right place at the right time will help in an emergency situation.
Now you can see a text message that we simulated a situation of brake failure. And at the same time, the pilot not only knows that he will have some problems when braking, he is also given advice what to do in this situation. Below, we see that he needs to use the parking brake to equalize this situation.
The computer immediately shows the reason for the failure, and this is already helping technicians on the ground know where to look. In the near future in flight, information from the main computer will be displayed not only on the display, but also on the navigator of the flight helmet. Here is a prototype of the helmet of the future. Developed specifically for the Su-57 fighter, it shows information about both piloting and the combat situation. Speed, height of sighting mark with calculation of all coordinates, distance to target.
A missile with an infrared homing head, respectively if it is brought to the targets and the pilot have received capture, then the aiming mark will change accordingly from Christ to a circle. He will know that the target has been captured, and further on the scales, he will see whether he is allowed to launch according to the conditions or not allowed, in which direction the pilot is looking in the same direction. Then the missile homing head is deflected.
The entire member of the future, the skill of 2 kilos, was tested on special rain stands. It was filled with water, tested in a wind tunnel, including strength, giving a load as when catapulting. By the way, during those tests, one prototype cracked, after which these slots were made. Strength knocked down the frenzied airflow that goes when catapulting the helmet of the future. Pilots are already in the sky. In aviation, the continuity of generations is always important, and this of course applies not only to pilots and engineers, but also to the aircraft themselves. The newest is always a continuation of the previous one. The evolutionary path of development seems to be an exception in 57, but this of course is not the work in KV Sukhoi, which has been going on for decades. If you look closely, then the appearance is also from previous developments, reminiscent of experimental. The Su-47 Burput boom with a reverse sweep of the middle 0.002. Berku was involved in the program to create the project T-50 fighters of the 5th generation of our today 77 article names on Burput. For the first time, the internal placement of weapons was implemented, and composite materials were widely used in the production of the airframe. Today, the Burput remains in a single copy, a museum sample, but also an approach to it as a combat unit.
Aviation came from the cavalry, and in the cavalry they sat on a horse all the time on the left, so stepladders for planes to enter the cabinet were made on the left.
This, by the way, is about traditions and continuity in aviation. Hero of Russia pilots, test pilot Igor Votintsev was the first to lift the Eagle into the sky in '97. He is a legend among testers of today's multifunctional frontline supersonic fighter bomber Su-34, which in the troops affectionately called the Duck. And a distinctive nose. Also his chick. The father of 27 bombers recognized and destroyed enemy ground objects. The Su-34 bomber gained maneuverability and the fighter prefix. After completing its mission, the Su-34 can evade enemy missiles. This is demonstrated in combat as the Su-34 crew evaded the American Patriot missile over Donbass, experiencing up to 7 Gs of overload. Well, he's leaving. Blue. Yeah. There you go. I noticed the point behind me.
And she hit her ears.
How many hands the hand hurts due to the fact that the pilot actively controls the aircraft, and during overloads and at high speeds to do this is incredibly difficult, considering with one hand the pilot has to pull a 32-kilogram weight. In general, this is itself an incredibly frontline bomber capable of avoiding 3 enemy missiles. Adopted in the spring of 2014, it showed itself during a special military operation. Yeah, so the Earth bent. Adjustable aerial bombs from 250 kilograms to 3 tons. Flat plane weapons with their destructive power, changing the course of hostilities so that today Russian military pilots can conduct such combat work. In 1999, Igor Vosemitsev, together with actorman and tester Alexander Grivoronsky, risking their lives, tested the Su-34, setting world aviation records for carrying capacity. They didn't think about it, they just did their job.
2 records were set with the lifting of 2 tons and 5 tons above 11,000. My mood lifts when I hear Prophet 3000. I haven't gotten to that application.
That what?
The plane was delivered with a hint that suggests its utility, and I'm truly elated and proud. Proud of the pilots, proud of the plant.
Aviation Plant Flight Test Station, the next car, or as it is customary to say products, frontline bomber Su-34 is being prepared for one flight. The aircraft was recently taken off the final assembly line.
We inspect for leaks, look at the condition of the tires, the stability of the propellers in the air channels that sell the cleanliness of one aircraft flight is very responsible. This flight should show how the machine meets the technical specifications.
Long and dull. Lovka Vladimir Filipov at the plant with 85 started as a simple technician. One Su-24 bomber car now shares his experience with young people.
Let it be iron, but it has its own life. Each plane has its own fate. Everyone is not different. It seems that they are all the same in appearance when you work with them. They are all different. Therefore, they also became what kind of person they are, their destiny.
We always inspect the car before flying, get acquainted, so to speak, with ours. A comrade on the plane inspected the plane, got to know each other, stroked it, let it fly. Because as we are, so he treats us. The plane was made by people, so a part of each person is embedded here, and we are his.
We always cheer up the pilots, wishing them a happy flight. Types of meeting the car poison covered the ironing, and all this is as if a piece of myself is sent to her everywhere in the shower. I am worried about landing.
Yes, I answer. Ask on the left below.
Life is united.
He looks at the plane for a long time, taking off from the ground. This is the moment of birth of the frontline bomber. This is really the most difficult job of aircraft engineering to wait for. Vladimir Filipov himself dreamed of becoming a pilot, but it hasn't happened yet. He remembers the moment he fell in love with the sky.
I flew on a plane once in 1974.
There were 100.
For aviation has been my passion for 10 years. Everything has changed upside down. The prospect feels detached. The rise in altitude turned everything upside down at once. I even wrote an essay about how I spent the summer. It was this flight that he stayed on for the rest of his life.
One flight usually lasts about an hour, checking all systems, stability of operation.
This is the birth of the plane. Here it is born.
See here.
Before that he was too, but everyone dragged him out of there. He himself showed that he can fight.
How was the ride?
The rule is enough for such flights to make sure that the machine is ready for combat missions, trials on different modes, high altitude speeds, and after the crown flies away from the nest to troops in distant air garrisons.
Every time the plane leaves the Enterprise, there is such an unspoken rule, pilots, which are already leaving the military five. They make a gesture by waving their wings to the entire team of the Enterprise. The pilot waves his wings and thanks a team of thousands for performing his work. When you stand on the runway, well, it's clear that these are goosebumps. It is clear that these are emotions, but incommunicable.
A special difficulty is the training of specialists behind the crippled soldier's passage. We can't find those who assemble aircraft, so we train all the workers ourselves on our website, give them theory, give them practice, and after that we only release them for the manufacture of products into personnel, the most important thing here.
Carefully assembled, you can see what the workers are working on. Here the aircraft body is already fully assembled, and gradually in the empty metal frame of the future machine, all the electronics are installed, wires are laid, heavy painstaking work.
One of the large harnesses takes over 10 kilometers of wire. This is one of the largest fuselage gults that are installed on our products, as in the human circulatory system. Capillaries and other parts are also in the plane.
Once empty planner, almost before your eyes, turns into the same supersonic bomber for many here aircraft industry, and not just a matter of life. The history of the plant is also the history of the family.
The factory opened in 36. Grandfather came here at 38. Already the father is the same Army plant Chickalov. And for more than 40 years at the plant, I am an aviation technical school Army after the Army plant Chickalov. The eldest son is the Chickalov plant Army plant. For the entire 7th Society, 222 years of breeding for myself, my 7th, and because my grandfather started this, I continue for him.
The brothers work here, the wife is a real dynasty. During all this time, more than 10,000 aircraft of combat leagues, Sushi 15, 17, 19, 9, 115, 124 were produced from the plant. And of course, today's trial, 34 flagship fighter bomber aircraft.
Indeed.
We survived the 90-0 hard 90 years when the entire defense industry was on the verge of liquidation, including our aircraft building enterprise. If, of course, our President Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin had not made a decision to consolidate all remaining defense enterprises, including aviation state holdings. In the corporation, it would probably be very difficult for us to participate in any military operations today.
The main task of the state corporations created then, it was to stop the collapse of industry, preserve personnel, scientific and production potential.
I came in 2001. This was my first acquaintance with the plant. This shop just doesn't stop.
Various things.
The type of work is savings. Mechanical processing is carried out earlier. You go into those, it was quiet, it was quiet. Why? Because at the beginning of the 2000s, unfortunately, the state did not even have the opportunity to finance us. Accordingly, the plant time was not loaded in 2007, according to my year, was signed per. For the contract for the manufacture of the Su-34 aircraft plant,
the modernization of the enterprise was carried out, new equipment was purchased, and in 2011 began serial production with U-34. Today it is in the world news, as well as the deeply modernized fighter MiG-31K, armed with the Russian aviation complex Dagger-1 combat use of hypersonic missile 2022. In the zone of special military operations, supersonic fighter interceptor long-range action was born. 31 also conducts patrols, detecting and destroying air targets. He went on combat duty at 81. Then it was the first Soviet fighter, 4 generations, but today it remains the record holder for the fastest aircraft in the world, the only one reaching speeds of up to 1,000 km per hour. After deep modernization, this is already a different aircraft from the previous one, only the glider itself remains.
Tests of this aircraft were completed in 19. In 20, the letter A was assigned now. Its adaptation to the tasks of a special military operation is being finalized, and the weapons control system has already been finalized. This is a completely different information control field, which provides easier combat application faster.
Making decisions.
We can show the information controllers of the aircraft field how it is developed, and in general how important the layout is on the training aircraft UTS, which is currently being developed by UKB Mikoyan. The fight for every gram of the aircraft's weight and every second of the pilot's attention has been going on since the very beginning of the design. It all starts with such ground test flights.
We're flying apart. The opening speed is great.
Beginning to evaluate the attention reserves.
Excess drag is great.
In order to understand how conveniently located the interface in the cockpit, engineers evaluate the reserves and attention of the pilot at different stages of flight. This is how it is done under the left hand of the pilot. 3 buttons, red, green and blue on the right at eye level. A small scoreboard on which lights of the same colors light up. The pilot during takeoff turns must still be vision. Read the burning lights and gasetic, pressing buttons of certain colors. The bulbs light up faster and faster the time that the pilot uses to extinguish the lights, and there are reserves. His attention, that is, free from piloting in real flight, for example, this is the time for combat use.
The more comfortable a comfortable pilot is to fly away, the more relaxed he is, the more reserve of attention we will get. This means that it is not a post-focus task, but what for? He needs 50% attention to complete tasks, the rest is free.
After refining the original interface, attention reserve indicators improved by 35% simply because of the correct layout of all indicators, and the choice of the right color trivia in aviation does not happen.
Engineers understand this. From an engineer's point of view, it was inconvenient at first to have a very colorful cabin. There were many colors, they were different, they distracted attention, and it was difficult to understand immediately what you were wasting more time for. When the picture is oversaturated and you look at it, you are the information that you should emphasize for yourself. At this moment, you begin to choose and search for it for a long time.
Creating an aircraft is also a study of the behavior of the pilot. It is carried out on this simulator, on the pilot sensors and special glasses. The test flight is more than 600,000 records, read over 80 different parameters, psychophysical tension at each stage of flight, pulse pressure, as well as an assessment of the pilot's eye trajectory.
You can observe how it happens. The pilot's pupil moves along with his head. To what extent are the parameters of objective control, how well the pilot flew with this picture or with this one, if the pilot is delayed on some instruments. And so this suggests that, well, probably something is not drawn very well.
When creating an aircraft, the co-author at almost all stages helps designers and engineers incorporate tactical requirements from aircraft control to weapons control in KB Mikoyan. This tradition began when Soviet aircraft designer Artem Mikoyan himself started it. His son Avanes Mikoyan, the aircraft engineer, has worked almost his whole life in his native KB and remembers the origins of any plane according to his forefathers' principles.
I was very respectful of faded guitars, especially so that the pilot would be comfortable, so that God forbid there would be discomfort in the cockpit, or poorly located control knobs, or poorly provided ejection. It's behind all this. He watched me very closely.
A considerable time has passed since I first heard stories credited to Artem Ivanovich Mikoyan about at Akab Mikoyan. In the cockpit of the aircraft, MiG should not be created without the participation of the pilot. No one better than a pilot can tell the designer how to make it convenient and comfortable. Take, for instance, the landing gear crane control switch. It should be positioned under the pilot's left hand. In a convenient place, its length should be comfortable enough. The switching force should be comfortable enough, but at the same time tangible. And so there are many.
Hero of Russia, senior pilot, tester at KB Mikoyan, Mikhail Belyaev first saw the newest MiG-29 back in the Military School 80. Being Cadet 2, the fighter flew from the factory to the military unit and landed for refueling, recalls. It was a small revolution in consciousness. Where progress goes, the appearance fascinated the contours of the wing fuselage engines. That moment for Mikhail Belyaev turned out to be the moment of his whole life.
It's an airplane. Airborne 747 is a prototype flying laboratory aircraft MiG-35. This is the aircraft on which all new promising systems are being tested, on which we are preparing everything that will be on the serial version of the MiK-30 aircraft.
First, the service of the armed forces almost 20 years ago graduated from the School of Test Pilots. Now his job is to give life with an aircraft lifted into the skydeck MiG-29 cubic meters. Now puts on the wing the successor of the legendary 29 fighter, Generation 4++ MiG-35, together with Dmitry Selivanov today's flight mission on 8 sheets. Show, of course, you can't.
At this moment.
Specifically, the new aiming navigation complex is the new BRLS and a little bit. The cabin's equipment is all new.
You can't talk about him.
The best is not worth it. Very beautiful, good work, a lot of interesting things, but I can't tell you.
Is it true that on-the-ground cameras installed on the fuselage and in the cockpit show us all the beauty of flight, but pilots are not up for beauty? Today, they must test, among other things, the performance of the so-called low-altitude flight system. That is, whether the new equipment correctly recognizes the height, and this is small and extremely small heights of 50 meters above the ground, then count 10 meters above the head. The non-test pilot at this time looks exclusively at the indication performing a flight task
Everything is strict here. For instance, when testing a Dacia car for stability and controllability characteristics, the score is given in millimeters to determine its performance.
Dacia at half the stroke of the handle means that full stroke, for example 100 mm, I have to move it by 50 to withstand the full rotation of the aircraft at a given angular velocity. At the same time, estimate approximately at what angular speed the aircraft rotates and then return to a neutral state. If instead of doing half a stroke 50-0, for example, I did 54 or 56, then this no longer counts. So when such statements are made, there is no romance in the sky for test pilots. It's work. It's hard, intense work. When you have to do strictly according to the points, do what is prescribed to you.
The new aircraft design is based on the MiG-29, but the wing area of the glider has been increased.
The number of suspension points on the wing increased from 6 to 8. A new optical positioning station and a new engine with higher thrust were added. A fundamentally new car.
In the development of 35 fighters, special attention was paid to improving the performance of up to 30% of the fuselage coverage. In this shop, the cutting machine cuts carbon fiber blanks, strips of different lengths, shapes that are stacked from or glued together in a special way.
Excavation takes place under the laser. Laser machines show the direction, how to put it, in what form to look at now. Then now there is a redemption of 0.90 pos. This will be a redemption at 45 degrees.
Strength depends on this. Each part has its own scheme and number of carbon fiber layers depending on the load in flight. After a vacuum bag is put on the workpiece, the products are sent to the furnace. They also make cellular filler here. What will be, for example, inside the cladding of aluminum alloy foil of various thicknesses is first assembled into an accordion specially glued and also baked. Further, during stretching, the same filler is formed, the entire panel is baked. Then, and despite such airiness, the lightness is very durable, even thin supports the weight of a person. But this is, of course, for a spectacular picture. The present test of composite materials pass completely differently. Other loads, for example, the detail is stretched.
The load is monotonous. Load in the hot summer season.
You can clearly hear the clicking of individual threads within the part.
14 on the chest.
Destruction of the sample.
We are demonstrated the durability of a thin strip of material under extreme loads. This occurs within a static test hall designed for experimental dry tests. Additionally, another extensive strength test entails multi-hour vibration. They pass this, though not all materials avoid tearing or cracking. Producing composite material parts takes up to 5 days, while metal parts require significantly more time. Rarely are initial production stations of the foundry shown for future aircraft. A highly intricate technological process spans about 20 days to fabricate a single part, some of which are then directed to specialized baths. This is an electroplating shop dedicated to aircraft parts, where parts are given anti-corrosive properties. By immersion in a specialized solution, components become more resistant to atmospheric loads under electrical current. Humidity to aggressive conditions. By the way, such a light green color of a brand new aircraft is given precisely anti-corrosive coatings. This is the stage of docking the wings and the fuselage. But this illustrates how it appears. The factory supplies these engines, which are a masterpiece for the upcoming Su-35 aircraft. Once all units are installed, the aircraft is still on the slipways, but already showing signs of life. All systems undergo checking.
Do that job qualitatively. In any case, this equipment will defend our borders at the front. Everything for the front, everything for victory.
The front for locksmith collector Andrei Timoshenko is a personal story. He is a participant in a special military operation. He volunteered September 22nd.
There was a reservation. Well, a reservation doesn't mean anything to me. The main thing is to inspire. You need to protect the motherland. I came, and the Military Registration and Enlistment Office wrote a statement that refusing armor.
I fought in the assault detachment, the most intense about where I had to visit, what to see, feel, without saying words, you can't pick up several concussions from Andrei. A year later, he was commissioned for injury, the Order of Courage, or, as the military say, the man received for his participation in the operation to capture the base point. Vidnik combat aircraft now perceives somewhat differently than an infantryman supported by aviation.
Pride, well, is felt for the fact that you collect such the best aircraft in the world.
Su-35, its first flight in February 2008, and then the global economic crisis broke out to produce a new aircraft. If it was planned only as an export option, everything changed in one day, and it is well remembered at the plant.
The impetus for the development of serial production was the visit of Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin in the rank of Prime Minister in 2009 when he visited our plant. A protocol was signed on the basis of which a contract for production was already concluded. There are 48 aircraft in series. We were then ordered this for the enterprise. Naturally, at that time, gave a very big boost to the part of receiving funds, which we, in turn, spent on modernization.
At the same time, the production of the T-50 of the future Su-57 was launched before the plant, and OKB Sukhoi had an ambitious task to make a completely new aircraft for 5 generations. Modernization of production was necessary, then the Su-35 fighter raised the enterprise itself to a new level, and of course our Air Force.
Such immense strength.
We established the plant together. Oh, how dry it was. That is, there were always brigades here, day and night and around the clock.
So many questions.
So many comments.
35 was a remarkable year.
The fighter is a great fighter.
It allows you to do many of these things. Well, that are on the Su-27. You couldn't even imagine the same somersaults of the same Cobra. That the Cobra was for the chosen ones happens in principle on this plane. Well, any pilot here in formation, show him he is unprofitable.
For the first time in public, it was performed by our test pilot, Viktor Pugachev. It was 89, now it is called Beaver Pugachev, performed on the Su-27 fighter. Then this is the newest car abroad, we presented it for the first time. Viktor Georgievich remembers that we were preparing like for the Olympics to be the best of everyone and to impress the whole world. This is exactly what happened as soon as we arrived in France. We do not hold such meetings. Hi, when did you take off? Well, it's been 3.5 hours. Yes, where did you sit? Questions other than desire, you understood. So why can't a fighter jet fly from Moscow to Paris? And where did you sit? He says, yes, no, where we didn't sit. How can this not happen? You don't have any suspended tanks. Nothing will happen. Calm down. We arrived, took off 3:30 ago. They fell silent. I say it can't be like that, and went in circles, which means they understood this news. This cannot be the case for years, but we have seen it. Our planes at international air shows always attracted the attention of spectators, and pilots were greeted like superstars, and this tradition is also passed down from generation to generation. The way Sergei Bogdan was greeted in China, this only confirms the Olympic faster, higher, stronger, and this is also true for me.
More dangerous is what happens at air shows. Every maneuver here is always executed to the extreme, basically. The maximum is squeezed so that it is a spectacle, and therefore to say that I like this figure, I like to park. That's when I rest, I like this figure. Opening the lantern pleasantly blows the air.
A breeze?
And on the ground, there is also training to keep yourself in shape, morning exercises, or evening hockey. This sport is chosen not only because of physical activity. Sergei Bogdan says hockey players have a lot to learn.
Interaction and complexity within a group of 3 members. The method of killing is the same, and the speed of decision-making.
Sergei Bogdan's love of airplanes appeared in childhood. It just so happens that his hometown Voskresensk near Moscow is located near the test flight area. There is a scientific testing ground of aviation systems. Before the boy's eyes, the newest machines flew by, the sounds of fighters fascinated and forced them to look at the sky again and again. Of course, then I did not think that I would become a test pilot myself, but I firmly decided to enter a military aviation school, and already there experienced officers noticed that the cadet could have it. The future.
Second year concert, my pilot instructor wrote my graduation characteristics. After flights on the L-29 aircraft, it is advisable to use test work, but to be honest, it seemed funny to me. Well, somehow I'm some kind of cadet, and this seemed kind of slight irony to me. Well, although it seems like a serious document.
A few decades later, already being a tester, he learned why the instructor wrote that in the description. The fact is that Cadet Sergei Bogdan grasped everything on the fly in all senses of the word and followed the modes that the instructor showed very accurately. So the officer was afraid that he himself would do something wrong, and the cadet will remember this. He will have, as they say, the wrong one. Another test flight by Sergei Bogdan. Changed by test pilot Sergei Chernishev. Working in pairs here has its own characteristics. Coherence is important, just like hockey.
Flight 157. It allows you to fly at any interval and distance. It is very powerful, very sensitive. With such characteristics of controllability, you can fly at any intervals and distances, including the most minimal. This is a few meters, 10, 15 minutes. We fly when breaking through clouds. In general, then we endure. The shortest separation between planes is 2 meters.
3 meters.
In general, just to maintain visual contact.
Modern close air combat, of course, is unlikely, but the developer does not exclude this, and therefore conducts various tests to understand how this or that machine will behave. This is what close combat can look like today. His plane enters at a speed of about 1,000 kilometers per hour. Literally in 20-30 seconds, the speed drops to 500. Energetic maneuvering, speed already 300. The aircraft becomes uncontrollable, and only the mode through maneuverability allows at these speeds to quickly turn around or even turn the aircraft into the tail. Melee combat is fleeting. Everything will take about a minute, maybe a little more.
We practiced a certain entry mode, air combat, one aircraft pilots without super maneuverability mode, that is at the angles of attack at the permissible, and the other aircraft pilots at the extreme angles of attack, and as a rule for somewhere around 20 seconds. An aircraft with a super maneuverability option. Here is the Su-35 from 57 aircraft. Within 20 seconds, it turns out to be in the rear hemisphere, ready to launch for defeat. Accordingly, if two super maneuverable aircraft converge, we also begin to turn towards each other energetically. Then literally 20 seconds later, we find ourselves in a position where two planes are in a corkscrew rotating on top of each other. And we see each other nose distance from 100 to 200 mm.
The interest of foreign partners in our aircraft 157 is very high. We already have specific customers. Today, many countries are engaged in the creation of fifth-generation aircraft, including the United States and Russia. But it is our aircraft that participate in real combat operations. In many ways, it is superior to its counterparts.
God is performing a test flight somewhere. They are performing a turn. This is exactly the same case. We're checking him out. Let's see how much the structure is loaded. Pressure spray, blue area, low pressure area. Where the red through the yellow is the area of high pressure, these are the voltage fields. Where it turns red, the voltage is higher.
Flight simulation on a state-of-the-art supercomputer is a crucial step in developing our fifth-generation fighter jet. For example, it analyzes the points of maximum glider deformation, helping designers pinpoint where reinforcement is needed. This reflects a growing trend in aircraft manufacturing. More reliance on computer simulations and less on traditional lifetime testing, leading to quicker and more cost-effective production. The supercomputer takes into account all the chemical and physical properties of materials. Here, for example, shots of testing the cannon of the fifth-generation fighter. Before that, there was a computer simulation that showed what would happen when a shot was fired.
Interesting effect that we can see here. This is the redetonation of gunpowder gases. After leaving the barrel, the unburned gases come into contact with the environment, where there is oxygen, and accordingly there is a redetonation, which also pours on the structure. An assessment is made of how long the design will be able to withstand single shots, multiple shots.
Of course, the school plays a huge role. And today, we are talking about Mikoyan's school, the Sukhoi school.
Less than that.
Were developed and created. At the same time, of course, we must create the basis for the aircraft of the future, and the main thing at the moment is the use of digital technologies and development.
Of course, the drawings on paper are already in the past Su-57-1 Russian combat aircraft, which was completely created in 3 days. The documentation is all electronic at the factory during assembly. If a question arises, the worker can independently upload 3 models to check, working out the details at the modeling stage. All departments of the Design Bureau work as a single organism.
Constant communication with colleagues. Have you corrected something with a colleague here? Has something changed? Combatants sit down together at the table. You think, so how to tie it together? Where is the stiffness here? Which bracket not to throw? Well, this is such a creative process. You communicate with your friends in ordinary life and say, we are drawing some kind of plane there. Why are you used to drawing airplanes? What does an engineer draw? These are creative people. What kind of creative people do we have in our daily lives? This is the word we paint.
Constant questions over which designers are fighting, how to reduce the weight of the aircraft fuel consumption and increase the volume of the fuel tank in the struggle for weight perfection. Just the introduction of modern lightweight materials is not enough. It is necessary to reduce the number of parts and make sure that one unit has several functions at once. So, for example, the Su-27 aircraft originally had a brake shield. It was opened when landing to increase aerodynamic resistance on Su-35 plans designer finalized, and this function took over already rudder's direction and flop irons, and in place of the brake shield placed additional fuel tank newest 157. Of course, much more original solutions.
Number of parts drastically decreased compared to the Su-35 aircraft assembly. Accelerated because large panels are used, which simplify assembly, respectively minimize the time for assembly operations.
We see the aircraft as a platform that can be used for at least 50 years, effectively carrying out its task, including gradually introducing next-generation technologies, essentially turning into an aircraft from generation 5 plus 5 plus generation. This is the generation into which they are being introduced. Technologies are already separate technologies of 6 generations. There are different ideas, but including the ability to control small and unmanned aerial vehicles, which we are actively working on now.
That is, the future can be imagined like this. One multifunctional aircraft in the sky, and its pilot has several drones under his command. These are bombers, attack aircraft, and reconnaissance drones.
By 2030, 2035, quantity 5. Discovery systems will increase from 4 to 10 times. At a minimum, they will be able to replace unmanned transport aircraft or helicopters. If we talk about the military sphere, then of course these are the types. Attack aircraft such as helicopter aircraft, which are currently still used. I think in the foreseeable future they can already be replaced by unmanned aerial vehicles.
Sergei Bibikov came to the Design Bureau as a student in the Okobo Sukhoi practice for more than 10 years, targeted youth training program.
From the junior middle years of the Institute, the most talented young people are invited to the targeted training program where they simultaneously work, study, and receive knowledge that is specific to work in KB Sukhoi. It has been formulated since the time of Pavel Osipovich, thesis on trust in young people.
Only in this way can you tie strong knots between generations so that there is a continuous connection. Young, novice designers, engineers with burning eyes, cadets of flight military universities, lieutenants who have just graduated from schools. Some may not yet realize that they will devote their lives to flight tests. They are the future of our aircraft industry. It doesn't matter whether they admire the sunrises on the ground or fly behind the clouds to meet the dawn. People in love with the sky, for whom the plane is a work of art and flight is poetry.
After I understand that I have gone through all the points of the flight mission, done everything, and now I can look, what do I have on board? And if it turns out that the clouds can cause the sun around the sea or something else, then you genuinely experience satisfaction. Nothing comparable.
When there is a big cloud, you literally grab it by the edge and then you see such a giant force going up almost 10 kilometers, and there is some powerful rain activity there. And you fly around to the side. It's beautifully breathtaking, especially this contrast. When, let's say, it's raining downstairs, it's drizzly, the weather, the wind is strong, and you take off, the bright sun breaks through the clouds there. This is, of course, very impressive. Well,
this is bright, very bright on a cloudy day when you get on the plane, especially the rain. Everything sprinkles there. The plane took off, they dug out, took off, you gain altitude, and now it begins to light up like this about the block, so to speak, to shine through, and then you jump out, and there it is, a bright blue sun. Immediately the mood is different, but I say in words, this cannot be conveyed.
We had such a pilot, a tester, unfortunately, is no longer with us. Sergei Nikolaevich Melnikov, his phrase was so interesting. What's the weather like? There was no earth. The sun always shines behind the clouds.